for the break in transmission due to technical problems beyond our control. But we are now fully set. Merry Christmas. This is our special Christmas broadcast. We are going to be discussing Liberia's economy. That's the hot button issue in the country. So the same way on Christmas Day, you have the big game coming on. Today is our big game on the Liberian economy, past, present, and the future. At this time, I'm going to send it over to my co-host, Mr. Anthony Sie, who's going to introduce our guests and then introduce the program as well. Mr. Sie.
Thank you, Dennis Jad. It is always a pleasure to be here on this network focus on Liberia. But this time around, we are here on a Christmas special for our viewers, our followers, our fans. And so we want to take the time to say welcome and welcome. Those in cyberspace, if you have joined us, please share the video. An exciting Christmas package for you. No other better way to do it other than to get to George Noble, Sam Jackson, a veteran who have been around. We know him to be the economic guy. And we also have our business and economic guy here at Focus on Liberia, Mr. Ellis Tutu Jones. Gentlemen, we want to say welcome, starting with you, Mr. Sam Jackson. Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Nice to be here, and Merry Christmas to everyone. I wish you all had a very joyful day today. Thanks to everybody. I look forward to a spirited conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, right there. And to you, the man, Josh Lobbo, a gentleman who is now coming across as somebody who followed the issues of economics. Some people know him to be the politics guy, but his emphasis is on economic. Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you very much, Anthony, and thanks to the Focus on Liberia team. I want to say to all the Liberians following us, Merry Christmas. I want to say thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully, to those back home as well who have the privilege to tune in, I want to say Merry Christmas. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to having a fruitful discussion.
And the man, Ellis Tutu Jones, our economic guy, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Yeah, thank you again, Anthony. Again, it's a pleasure to be here on this Christmas Day special with two very brilliant and bright finance and economic experts. Again, happy holidays, season greetings, and thank you over the last few months for being a part of our shows. And we look forward to a very healthy and interesting conversation about the Liberia economy, past, present, and future. Thank you.
You heard him right there. Liberia economy, past, present, and future. That is our topic, and it is a whole package for you on this Christmas special. The stage is set. Folks, please share the show, and we will go right into it. At this time, I will turn the microphone over to our business and economic guy, Mr. Ellis Tutu Jones. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Again, so we thought it wise on this big day, special day, to put the economy into perspective in terms of where we've come from, beginning from the 70s, the 80s, 90s, and current. Most times we tend to focus only on the current economic realities, but it's good to have a perspective and a flashback. In other words, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from. So we thought it wise to bring in someone who was a major player in the late 70s and 80s, held a series of positions, worked on Wall Street, worked in the United States, global finance, went back home, and he'll be sharing some of the events, some of his experiences while he tried to build and help contribute to the Liberian economy. We also have Mr. Lobbo, who is no stranger to anyone in cyberspace. He's been very active and aggressive in terms of his views. I think he also one of those who are very strong in the area of finance, banking, economics, does a lot of extensive research. So we'll be going back and forth on this special event, asking some very interesting questions about people, not just the economy, but who managed it or mismanaged it. So again, thank you for joining. And we'll start with Mr. Lobbo. Again, just before we got disconnected, can you just wrap up? How do you feel about Liberia economy in the past, How do you feel about it now, and what do you think the future looks like?
All right. Just to answer your question real quick, here's what I say. There were ups and downs. There were high and low. I strongly believe that under the regime of President Trump, the Liberian economy was doing relatively well. I strongly believe that the human capacity building was something that was heavily concentrated on Ottawa. I believe that agriculture, self-sufficiency, food security, and economic independence was something we saw under the Ottawa government. So I believe the economy thrived on Ottawa. Fast forward to that of the PRC government, having read extensively, given what was borrowed, given some of their economic policy, and we know that the economy under the PRC government did not flourish, it crumbled, and subsequently will result into a civil war, which we know what happened after 14 years. 2006, Liberians elected a new government, which ushered in the Unity Party government of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. We knew some of the challenges that were on ground. We knew Liberia was referred to as a failed state. The World Bank referred to it had to pick up start from the arches. And we saw the transformation that were made. We know there were a lot of investments made under the UP government. There were a lot of reforms. We got the economy going again. We know in 2013, there was some slowdown after the Ebola outbreak, and then growth subsequently went down, but at least it managed to stay on course. But we know the infrastructure, the foundation for growth was there. And now to where we are in 2019, in 2017, we elected a new government, which happened to be taking everything off the rails. So now we have the economy that is crumbling in terrible shape, where people cannot get paid, where consumers' confidence is down, foreign direct investment is down, our international credibility is ruined. So yeah, that is where we are. So it just depends on where you want to pick it from. But overall, the way in which I would summarize it, I strongly believe that we need an economic agenda that's heavily focused on the productive sector of the economy. One thing I've come to realize from all the economy in the past, it has heavily been concentrated on only the extractive sector of the economy. What do I mean by that? Meaning that we need policies nowadays that will allow the finished goods, that value added to the finished goods, to be produced in Liberia. For example, like fire soda, so that we can produce some of the things that we consume at home. So those type of things is what I want to see. I want to see concession agreements now in this 21st century that is focused towards the productive center of the economy, because we believe that given our labor skill, we do not have already skilled labor force. We need to be able to create jobs for those people. So by investing in the productive sector of the economy, that could lead to job creation, which could also subsequently lead to wealth creation for them and financial independence for the country and more revenue for the government. Then we can be able to undertake a lot of different projects. But unfortunately, this is where we are.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lobbo. Let me go to one of the veterans of Liberia's economy, Mr. Jackson. You and I talk a lot in the past, and we still are good, I would say colleagues. We discuss issues, finance, banking. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We don't always agree on every economic or financial issue, but I can say I have a lot of respect for your depth and your understanding of global finance, banking, and economics. Could you describe to us what the 70s looked like in terms of the feelings in Liberia, in terms of how were the people living, in terms of per capita, what was the living standard? So let's start from the 70s, and then you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the Liberia economy, or the Liberia saga.
Thank you very much. When I speak, I'm an empiricist. I like to speak by the numbers, okay? And I mean, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that if you look in terms of comparative analysis, the 60s and the 70s were pretty stable, and there was economic growth, and people had jobs, okay? However, you have to look at economic growth rate, and you have to look at the improvement in socio-economic conditions. And when I speak on these issues, I like to refer to people who wrote about it, who researched it. the Liberian economy, in terms of the openness, this whole liberal economy originated from 1944 with open door policy, as you know. And the whole idea of an open door policy is to attract foreign direct investments to what? To create jobs, to create income, to transfer technology, and basically and to give the country prosperity. But if you look at the growth from 1954 all through the 60s into the 70s, there's a book. I'm sure all of you heard about this book 1,000 times, written by Robert Clowell and all. It's called Growth Without Development. In fact, Jeanette Coleman, who was the president of Spelman, was one of the researchers that went to Liberia. And they wanted to understand this phenomenon where they have, this huge amount of economic growth, right? Liberia was second only to Japan in terms of economic growth. But when you dug deeper into the socio-economic conditions of the people, in terms of the literacy, in terms of maternal mortality, in terms of the education, only like less than 10% of Liberians were illiterate in the 60s and the 70s. Okay, so you had huge economic growth, but there was not a concomitant improvement in the lives of the people. I went to Liberia in 1979. I've been, working on Wall Street, Bank of America, and my last job before I went to Liberia was second vice president at Chase Manhattan Bank. I was recruited by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. I was recruited by Omer John Bestman and the late Charles Green. And I was deputy controller of the ministry.
Okay, Mr. Jackson.
But now,
Jackson,
let me just
I
go
want
back.
you to walk us.
Yeah, I'm going to walk you through what happened in 19.
Right. How were you recruited?
Okay, I was recruited. Go ahead.
Is it a time? Can I ask a question? Is it time? Are we on time?
Absolutely, Trump.
Okay, yeah, okay. Look, it was a thing. Liberia went to go get $30 million euro currency financing. The minister of finance. Okay, I knew Ellen.
Is this a time? I want to know.
In 1978.
Mm-hmm.
In 1978, Liberia needed money to complete the rest of the what they call it, the OAU. They were planning for the OAU in July of 1979. Mm-hmm. And when it came to late 1978, Liberia needed money. So they were looking for $30 million euro currency financing. And they came to Chase Manhattan Bank. Mm-hmm. We're talking so. Okay. So they came to the bank. So Ellen knew me, but I ran into them at Chase Manhattan Bank, okay, at One New York Plaza. And they were so impressed that I had a young Liberian boy working in the bank. Ellen knew me from my progressive politics in Brooklyn, 73, 74, 75, okay? Then she saw me as this, senior level officer of the bank. And she said, but Sam, what are you doing? We need to take you home. So like in less than 30 days, they made all the arrangements. They came and they brought a truck to my apartment. They created my belongings. And I was in Liberia by December 1978, working at the Ministry of Finance as Deputy Controller for Cash and Banking Relationship. My job was to do the reconciliation of all of the national accounts. So I went between the controller's office at that time. Charlotte David, the president's niece, was the head controller, and I was deputy. And my job was basically to do the reconciliation. And of course, April 14, 1979, you guys know the rest of the story. But I want to go back to 1971. My good friend George Lobbo had this glowing, of the Turbo economy. When you compare the Turbo economy to the Turbo economy, by 1971, the economic growth rate was only 2.8%. Okay, what you saw, okay, in 1971 was the stabilization. You have this rapid meteoric growth rate in the 50s and the 60s. For 1971, there was a flattening of the growth rate, and that growth rate was only 2.8%. There were other issues you had. The other issues you had was that the economy was narrow, just as narrow as it is today. We were depending upon two primary commodity exports, rubber and iron ore. Rubber and iron ore represented 87% of export earnings. 87% of export earnings. So there was a very narrow.
Sam, can I inject real quick? Can I hold you there real quick? Because I want us to be educated.
Why do you want to inject? Nobody, look, please.
I want to hold you real quick to something. I want to hold you to something.
Sam, let me ask the question. You continue after that.
Sammy, you continue. Hold on 1 second now.
Well,
listen.
I'm going to leave this program because this is how this guy is. He speaks. Nobody.
Listen, let me say this to you folks. Let me hold this real quick.
Take some notes and ask.
Sammy, I'm not here to take notes.
I'm not going to.
Let me finish. Let me ask the question real quick. I want to.
Nobody bother you.
Let Jackson.
Okay.
More than 5 minutes. Nobody
speak for 5 minutes, Sammy. Go ahead. Let's go ahead. I just want to know because we have a time. Let's go ahead. You can't take all day and be reading biography. Go ahead, Sammy. Let's go ahead.
Okay, Lobbo.
No, my man, this is Christmas. Let's not bring your rudeness to this program tonight. I beg you.
Go ahead, Sam. I wanted to get into John. I wanted to ask a question. Come on, me. I wanted to ask a question. But go ahead.
You can ask him later. You can ask the question.
Okay, go ahead. That's why I said, Sammy, can I ask a question? You said no. Go ahead. I will ask you later. Go ahead.
A GNI.
I think you got to take some.
The GNI per capita was $220, right? But if you look at in terms of the Palmer ratio and the Gini coefficient, you had, if you look at the gradations of where that income flow, you have 5% of the population making 90% of the income. Monrovia, Broad Street was the Rodeo Drive. You had the people in their can and all of these things. So the American Liberian had a great life. Monrovia, a certain part of Monrovia, the life was superior to most parts of Southern Europe, okay? But the real issue at that time, 95% of the people in the country were living in abject poverty.
Thank you.
The narrowness of that, oh God, okay, quiet.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh my God! I mean, this guy. I mean, look, I'm gonna walk away if this guy keeps.
Hold on. I want to.
I didn't say nothing, Sammy.
Hold on. Okay.
I wasn't the one that said thank you.
Welcome to our Christmas special. This is focus on Liberia, discussing our Christmas special, Liberia's economy, past, present, and the future. At this time, I will go to, and this is just the icebreaker. We'll go to Mr. Ellis Chuchu Jones, who's the editor of our Business and Economic Forum, to tell us his knowledge or what he knows, what he feels about Liberia's economy, especially from the 70s, maybe late 60s and the 70s.
Well, what I've read about and studied about Liberia past, economically, going back to the 70s, it was grossly mismanaged. Liberia per capita at the time was declining as of the 70s. I think in 1973, when former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf took over as deputy minister, that was particularly the reason that the economy, and we have charts to show that to back those data, was declining from the 70s all the way to the 80s. So when I hear people talk about the 70s as a golden year, in any economic terms, that's not correct. The GDP was falling, living standard was falling. And at the time you had Asia. Asia was per capita was just about the same as Liberia. The 80s was a disaster. Everyone knows that. I mean, in my opinion, it was just basically, no economic activities or growth. It was grossly mismanaged. Samuel Doe government was very irresponsible, or they were very inept in terms of economic terms. They did bring a few people, to help. But in my opinion, those were not people who were at the top of the field in economics and finance in the 80s. So it was a disaster, and that's what led to the war. Most people think that, Liberians just don't get along, or Liberians are just more tribalistic, but what I found from my study about Liberia is that not just Liberia, but anytime you have a, declining economy, wherever country it is, including the one we're in now, if your economy starts to fall and decline at the rate of which Liberia economy was falling from the 90s, you're bound for civil unrest. So again, the economy was mismanaged. Then, of course, after the 90s, with the interim government, there was a lot of deals made where, you know, the country resources were just squandered. Then going back to the election of Elijah Salif, it was a little bright spot, in my opinion, where a lot of structure were put in place. For the first time, Liberia has some kind of, you know, recognition and control. But where I think that they didn't do is they did not create Liberian industries.
All right.
Basically,
And we'll come to the Ellen era. Let's first, before we even move ahead with the discussion, let's first understand what we consider as the economy being good. What are some of the things that we're going to look at to tell that this economy is better, is doing well, or is doing worse? Let me start with you, Mr. Lobbo. What are some of the indicators that will tell us this economy is doing well or is doing poorly? What are some of the things that we're going to look at? So, you can hear me?
I can't. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Well, what about you, Alex? Are you hearing me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay.
I can hear you now, yeah, but you are not audible. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is where I want us to start from, by definition, and let's start on this basis. What will you consider the economy to be good, bad, performing poorly? What are some of the indicators we're going to look at, and that will give us a yardstick in measuring the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and today.
All right. Is that to me, Dennis?
Yes, I'm starting with you. I'm going around the table.
Okay. Let me, Dennis. Before I address this question, let me say something here real quick today. Let me set the stage here. I have great deal of respect for Samuel Jackson. I have great deal of respect for Samuel Jackson as an elder this man. But let me say this: today is Christmas Day. Many Liberians tune in here today because they do not have the understanding and they want to be educated. They want to learn. They want us to respect the audience. They did not turn in today to listen to people read their autobiographies. What Liberians understand, they know their economy is in a serious condition, and they want us who have the ability to explain to them what is happening. They tune into these shows to hear us and help them understand. So what they came here for is for us to speak to the level and explain things to them. Some of these data we're reading, we all have those data. We all understand the language. Okay. And I will ask that we respect those Liberians so that whatever we do here today, that we have the ability so every single person who tuned in today will understand what happened before, what is happening now, and what can we offer as recommendation for tomorrow. So the issue of going back and forth, how you got to Liberia, that is not what they tune in for today. Let me finish my statement. I don't want to be interrupted. Let me finish.
Your point is taken.
I want to say this. Let me finish. And I hope we can be able to have a time limit so we speak according to time, because I really want us to observe time. I will do that. And let's proceed. That is the way I want us to proceed. I want us to use this platform to educate our people. Please, that is my appeal to you people. I can answer any question moving forward.
Your point is taken. Please go ahead with the question.
All right. So here's what I consider a working economy. I know when it comes to international standard, they look at the HDI. I will take it from there. What do you mean by that? The Human Development Index. The Human Development Index, there are a lot of different factors that make up the Human Development Index. I listened to our senior part of Samuel Jackson alluded to that it is true that the data they show there was economic activity and economic growth, but the vast majority of our people live in abject poverty. So the economy that was thriving, that was doing well, that the data show all these growth rates, it did not transcend down the line. Very few Liberians have access to running water. Very few Liberians have access to good health care. Very few Liberians have access to quality education. And I believe that in this 21st century, what I consider an economy that is doing well is an economy where I look at household income per capita that is doing well. When we look at other countries around Africa, We look at household income for a city like Libreville, Gabon at 17,500. So when I look at an economy that is doing well, I want to know how many families are earning up to $17,000 a month. How many families can afford to send their kids to college? How many universities are available that when your child leaves high school, they can go there? When I look at an economy that is doing well, I want to know how many jobs have been created every 5 to 6 months basis. How much investments you are attracting because of the reform you are initiating, and how many people you are moving towards the labor market of the ladder. And when I'm talking about job, I'm not talking about job that has to do with just sweeping. I'm talking about job that leads to sustainable economic independence. Job that provide the skill, the knowledge that someone can be able to work and earn income to feed their family. So for me, I get the math. I can bring all the data and look back as far as we want to go back. What I have said is that everybody will fall. That is my theory. But what I'm concerned about is how you wake up when you fall. Liberia have fallen. She have waking up. She have fallen. She have waking up. We woke up from 2006 to 2017. Now in 2018, we're beginning to fall again. And I can say today with confidence that Liberia have fallen. So what we here to do is to talk about how we begin to fall. Since indeed we stood up in 2006, we were making sustainable amount of progress as a country. We saw the Human Development Index under the previous 12 years was great. We saw decentralization of educational facilities or education sector. We saw the healthcare sector. We saw investments being made. We saw over 30% of our national budget being invested in the healthcare sector. So those are the things I look at. We look at how much foreign direct investment was attracted. We understand that jobs were not created to meet the demand of the Liberian population. But another thing, we saw the initial investments that will translate to economic growth. Because we know that if more people get educated, that means we will train a skilled workforce. By having a skilled workforce, we could be able to make the case so that when we attract investors, we have the technocrat, we have the technicians, we have these educated people to fill those jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Lobbo.
So what happened in the past was that it is true we had jobs, but we didn't benefit the people. So that is the type of economy I want to see. And that's what I'm here to talk about.
Thank you. Stay on that with that same line of question, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much. Look, I'm going to briefly. I was asked by Alex how I got involved in the economy, and I wanted, and I think it's a good thing for people to know how I got it. And we're just taking 1 or 2 minutes, okay? But I want us to understand something here. I'm not here to compete with anybody. I'm who I am, okay? And I have published documents all on the internet, different journals, different places. I've done a lot of work. So I'm not here to compete with anybody. Now, you were talking about the economy in the 1970s. What constitutes a good economy? There are fundamentals of an economy. Economic growth is central. There's no argument against the centrality or economic growth being the fulcrum of development. But economic growth doesn't tell a story. You calculate economic output, or something we call GDP. GDP was something that was started by people like Simon Kuznets, what we call national income accounting. And national income accounting is designed to determine the total value of goods and services produced in an economy, right? That's the first thing. But then you have to look at the composition of that GDP. The composition means that, okay, in terms of the consumption part of it, the investment part of it, government spending, and then the export minus the input. That's the classic calculation of GDP. But GDP alone doesn't tell a story. So what we came up with, economists, welfare economists like Amartya Sen, Martha Nussbaum, and a guy called Mohammed Al-Haq, they devised something called the Human Development Index. What the Human Development Index does, it tries to determine the quality of life issues within the economy. It looks at health. It looks at longevity in terms of the life expectancy. It looks at education, but it also looks at gender parity. In the year 2000, the international system came together. 189 countries said they needed to establish some quantifiable methods of calculating the human condition. So it came out with something called the Millennium Development Goals. They had 8 goals, and those goals began with the eradication of poverty and went into education, then girls' education and all of that, okay? And then it set the platform for the global partnership to achieve that goal, right? In 2012, 3 years before the expiration, in fact, they said from 2000 to 2015, they wanted to reduce global poverty in half. And you, Alex, you mentioned the book the other day, The Bottom Billion by Paul Collier. Paul Collier was looking at that whole process and the resources that went into it and the outcome indicators of global poverty. And it showed that there's a bottom billion, the bottom billion, that most of the people who live in extreme poverty, and those people are in Africa. Liberia, why? Why do we have such extreme poverty in Liberia? We have extreme poverty in Liberia for several reasons. But the primary reason is what? Lack of good economic governance. The refusal of the politicians to provide goods and services to the people, to create an enabling environment to grow that economy, because the private sector has to be the engine of growth. Mr. Lobbo talks about.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
No, let me finish. Mr. Lobbo talks about the glory days of the Ellen Johnson administration.
And we'll come to that. That's why
you had a high growth rate initially, but those were jobless growth.
Right. We'll come to that, Mr. Jackson.
And let me just end on this. In 2012, the public sector created more jobs than the private sector.
We'll come to those specifics, Mr. Jackson. Let me go to Mr. Because each of you are talking like for 3 or 4 minutes. You know, I want us to keep it at 2 minutes at most.
Thank you.
So that we can cover a lot of these things. So I'm kind of introducing the timer now, because we want to go about this and again, let me clarify that this is not a debate. We just want to use the time so that we can do some comparative analysis, and we can go back and forth when things are not clear, but the intention is not for a debate. So let me go to you, Mr. Alex Jones. Your understanding of when economy is doing well, is when poorly, is doing bad, what are some of the things that we look at so that we can use these indicators to run a line through 70, 80s, 90, and now? Mr. Jones.
Can you repeat the question, please? I couldn't hear.
What are some of the things that we'll look at to tell whether an economy is doing good, is doing bad, is doing poorly, just garbage?
Yeah, basically, I mean, the consensus out there is that, of course, you want to see a growth rate, GDP. You want to see also the GDP per capita, which basically takes the total output, economic output, and divided by the number of people who live in the city, in the country. Now, you know, that's not the best form, but it's somehow a standard that all country uses. Then I think we all have the same consensus in terms of the HDI score, which is basically Human Development Index that takes into consideration life expectancy, portion of the GDP, the GNI, all right, and the educational standard. So those are the, you know, we just used, I mean, there's thousands of indicators, but if we just use, we can go to the corruption index, we can go to, you know, the unemployment rate, we can go to number of household income. But if we just stick to with the basics, right? And just let's use HDI and let's use per capita growth, okay? I mean, Liberia is a shithole country, basically, when you use those two indicators, and excuse my expression, but from the 70s to now, when people talk about progress, I really can't find data to support that. I mean, what is progress? If about 5% of the people in the capital city, you know, are doing well because they're connected to the political elite. And then the rest of the people in the country basically don't have, you know, running water. Their children can't go to school. I mean, that's not progress. So by all indication, and from 1970 to current, including the Eddie Johnson Sirleaf administration, in my opinion, and from all studies I've seen, Liberia never improved economically in terms of jobs, in terms of industry, in terms of export, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of, you know, higher capital income and things like that. So, you know, we didn't know what to do, or the people who led Liberia and the ones who are leading Liberia right now, they're totally like clueless on how do you get these rates up. And let me put that into context. What do I mean? It would be challenged to say Liberia should compare with any European, Asian, or even South American company. But there are models in Africa. Last time I mentioned Seychelles, I mentioned Rwanda, I mentioned Botswana, even Tanzania. All these countries, Mozambique, what you call Republic of Congo. These countries went through horrible wars, most of them. But look at their per capita and look at their GDP growth and look at even their living standards. They're far higher than Liberia. I did a comparison study a few years ago on Liberia and Sierra Leone, and in almost everything Sierra Leone was better than us. So we kind of, you know, we have a little bit of progress in terms of peace, and we see that we should have peace. There was no reason for the war. So peace is not the objective to say that, oh, just because we have peace, that means things are improving. Or just because, you know, there's no war, so that means things are improving. That's nonsense. Countries have done it. Country will continue to do it. And the only reason why Liberia has not grown or the lives of Liberians has not improved up to current is because you have idiots running the economy. People who don't have any experience, people who don't even understand how you grow economy, people who don't study it. These are all people who were friends of the president. And I'm going back to the 1980s, the Emmanuel Shaw, the Gafoyan, the American. These are people who can hold an intelligent conversation on economics.
Okay.
I challenge any one of them on any show. Come and discuss where were your policy, talk with your colleagues. You can't say that you're a policy maker and then you sit in the corner and sit behind political, you know, on Facebook, and come out and tell us what are the indicators you were targeting, what were your strategies to grow, what did you achieve. But if you can't do that, then find somewhere and sit down. And that's all the Liberian finance minister to correct. I haven't seen one of them that have the aptitude.
Thank you. I don't think Mr. Lobbo agrees with you, but let's start now. So using the indicators that we have identified, let's look at the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We skipped the 90s. Those were the war years. The 70s, the 80s, and now, and see at what point do we say we're doing well, or we're doing so bad, or, you know, what level of grade and why? Mr. Lobbo, let me start with you.
Dennis, thank you. I want to thank my dear brother there for that brilliant analysis. But here's what I said, Dennis, though. Going back to the 70s, I told you I'm not a big fan of going back to the 70s because it depends on what part of the 70s. We know that as of 71 was that of the Turbo era. I listened to Samuel Jackson saying that during that of the Turbo era that I was boasting about, that there was economic growth, but it did not benefit everybody. But when we talk about economic development, we talk about the job creation, we talk about education like he alluded to, we talk about health care. Then I would say it is hard to make that argument because as an economist, we investment across Liberia. It was during the Turbo's government that Liberia for the first time began to export agricultural produce to the world market. So for us to sit here today and say that, then it would be a contradiction to what happened. We know it was under the Turbo government or Turbo regime that we saw BCRDP open, NCRDP open. Those were agricultural projects. It was about self-reliance. It was about self-security, food security. So the reason why I don't like to go to that, I agree. On the issue of education, this is why I bow back as we want to go back. I strongly believe with 27-year rule of Todman, there was very little done to educate the Liberian people. Had Todman used that 27 years to decentralize education, to make sure that the population was educated and had skill, we may not have had that problem in when Tobo took over. But instead, we continue to breed a generation of young people, not educated, dormant index. We are not going to get to where we want to be, because even the job argument we want to make today, if we brought, we don't. So I have said consistently that what we need to do as policymakers, or as whatever we call ourselves as professionals, whatever recommendation that we need to make to government now, is to begin to demand that some 30% of our national budget is spent on education in youth empowerment. Now we have a generation of young people who majority of them were ex-combatants, some 17,000 plus young men who fought in the war. Some of them today are in the street. We refer to them whatever adjective we want to describe them. Some call them, some call them, whatever you want to call them. Those people are part of our natural resource. It's very, very important. This is why I've said consistently that if we believe we want to build an economy that will work for all Liberians, we must first get to the basics. We have to create
Mr. Lobbo
and educate our people. So here's my point, Dennis, on that. Let me get to this. Here's what I say to you.
Okay.
Let me say this to you, Dennis. There's no special time in the history, because in as much as I want to give credit to Tobo for his level of decentralization, not enough was done, given the population of Liberia. Even under the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf government that I support and defend, I know that a lot was done, but I strongly believe that more needs to be done. And I think this has to be a 10-year strategy development plan for Liberia, educating and empowering our young people. Because the only way we'll be able to get out of this, if the people don't have skill and don't have the education they need, technically, even if we build the infrastructure, how would they manage it? So right now, I don't want to allude to George Weah government, because this is a
I have a quick question for you based on what you just said. Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Definitely, I love it.
Okay. So you're saying that we need to put a 10-year plan together, correct?
I'm saying, you're asking me, I said for me right now, if I was to recommend, I think we need a 10-year educational developmental plan for the country. Yes, we need something like that.
So are you saying that the educational development plan is what is going to grow the economy?
No, that's not all. Listen, growing the economy, there are a lot of different things. There's not one activity that grows the economy.
Okay, so could you tell us what?
So let me finish now. You asked me a question. Let me answer the question.
Okay.
You asked me about the economy. Let me answer. The first thing about educating the people, we want to have a skilled labor force. That is one side. When we talk about the Liberian economy, it depends as a government. We have enormous amount of opportunities that we can explore. We have tourism sector. Liberia is here to tap into a tourism sector. Let me finish now. You asked me, let me answer the question. Let me finish. You asked me about growing the economy.
We have diamonds, we got gold, we got all.
So let me finish. But you asked me how we can grow the economy. We get to that.
Push.
No, I don't want to go to what you want. I got other opportunities. I'm not looking at what you want. Those are the traditional ways you want us to use. I'm looking at something different. Let's look at the agriculture sector. That is another major sector that we can use.
You can continue, but you're not answering my question, so you can move on.
You asked me how can we grow the economy? I'm telling you.
You got to hear the question I'm asking you before you can answer it.
You said, is that the only way to grow the economy? Right? I said no. I said it's one activity.
No, that is not my question.
What is the question?
Okay, thank you very much. My question is, what is...
You're breaking in, I can't hear you. What is the question again?
What is your strategy or your proposal to get the Liberian GDP or
grow the economy
up in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years? What are the things you would do? Policy, economic policy.
Alex,
that would do that.
We're gonna get to that point. We're still laying the basics here. So we're gonna get to that point, how to grow the economy. But because I was looking at how this comparative analysis, Lobbo, we're going to get to that point of how we move.
No, let me answer the question, Dennis. Hold on 1 second.
No,
let me ask you the question. Let me answer the question.
It's too
so here's my plan. Here's what I'm proposing to them. Here's
Mr.
what I'm
Lobbo.
proposing to the government
Mr.
to do.
Lobbo.
Let me answer the question. It won't take a few seconds if you.
Dennis, it'll just take me a minute, Dennis. Here's what I'm proposing to grow in this particular economy under the CDC government. Say we have a government right now, and we're talking like that. What I have proposed to this government is very simple. We have said the government first and foremost engage in activities that leads to economic growth. What are some of those activities? The government will have to decide because there are a lot of different sectors the government can look at. We said the government will diversify the economy. The government will look at other ways, other avenues to create revenue. What are those other avenues? We talk about the agriculture sector. We talk about the tourism sector. So those are other areas the government can look at. But that has to be done by the government.
Okay, you see, that's the problem I have with many of these people who are claiming to be politicians, economists, financial people. If you're going to look at sector, that's not a policy. The other day I was listening, hold on. The other day I was listening to comments, okay? Here's a guy who is running for president, okay? He should have an economic plan map up, A, B, C, D. You talk about sector, to look into sector, and what he said, oh, we're going to bring Liberians home, or we're going to look for best idea. If you don't know at this point what are those strategies, you shouldn't be running for president.
You talking about comments?
I'm talking about just people that come, anybody. If you don't know exactly what you're going to do, if you're telling me, say we got to look into the sector, then you haven't done your homework. You should be telling me, I'm going to do A. I'm going to invest $2 million into a fishery. It's going to yield 2% interest a year. It's going to hire 10,000 people. This is the map. You can verify the number. I'm going to reduce taxes by this amount. That's how a plan or someone who knows what they're talking about. But just saying that we're going to look into this other area or we have a big, that's nonsense, in my opinion.
Dennis, can I jump in, please?
And this is why I wanted you to jump in because.
Yes, let me come in.
Okay.
So go in, Mr. Jackson.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't know if George Lobbo doesn't know, but we have many plans. And let me just name some of the plans to him. And maybe you might want to take some paper and pen so he can know what these plans are, because there are plans. Maybe he hasn't read them. Okay, the first plan that Ellen Johnson, his heroine, came up with was the poverty reduction strategy paper. Okay, and that was a 2-year plan that was going to take us to get us out of the HIPAA and for debt forgiveness. And then we wrote the agenda for transformation. I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned the agenda for transformation. Then, yeah, okay. And then that part of Liberia Rising, okay? I just did 2 years ago in 2016, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, together with Samuel Twer and 2 other economists, we did the midterm review of the agenda for transformation. What we looked at was the outcome indicators from that program. And we determined that more than 80% of the objectives in that program were not met. Okay. Then there's another program that we put together for agriculture. Now we are talking about the government. The Liberia Agricultural Sector Investment Plan. That has been scrapped because it amounted to 0. Okay. Then we have the National Transportation Master Plan. That's
Mr.
also
Jackson.
amounted to 0. Okay.
Mr. Jackson.
No, but you ask, but why do you?
I just want to go into that agricultural plan. No, I'm not stopping you. I'm not stopping you. No, I'm not stopping you. I just want to ask a question. So because
Okay.
you're in these plans. So for instance, because when you say a plan, we want to see actual plan. So
but no, these are actual policies.
yeah, exactly. So let's take the agriculture plan, for instance. Let's delve into it a little bit. What does it say?
Okay, hold on a second. I think the conversation was he said we needed to put plans into place. I'm telling him there are plans,
Yes.
and I'm going to tell you this current government also has a plan. It's called.
Now, come on, Mr. Jackson.
Agenda,
You tell me a poverty reduction
But
and
let
it's
me
an economic plan.
You can say the plans are seriously wanting, okay?
No,
They don't-
just
they're not
just
serious plans.
Let's Johnson speak for once.
no, just naming the plan is not enough. So
Go ahead, Sammy. But let him speak.
I'm not here to defend those plans because I didn't.
You're letting him speak first now.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sammy.
I'm only reacting to the fact that he said there are no plans. So I'm telling him.
I know, again, Mr. Jackson, in fairness, hear my question again, because I don't want to be misquoted. Yeah. I'm saying, what is the economic plan? I'm not asking for a political plan on things like, oh, we're going to put kids in school. That's not an economic plan. That's a social plan. Okay. I'm talking about economic plan, dealing with interest rate, dealing with GDP growth. And what were the outcome of those plans?
Let me answer.
How much did poverty drop?
Can I answer?
Sure.
I can send you right this minute a 177-page document that I did for Bernard Ure, okay, for the All Liberian Party. I did that in 2017. I'll get your email addresses. That is a real plan, a plan that has numbers in there in terms of the investments, okay, the requirement, the capital requirements, and then the output for agriculture, for every subsector in agriculture, everything in tourism development, everything in human development. I have that plan. But let me see. I can send it to you all now.
I've read all those documents, Mr. Jackson.
No, you haven't read that yet.
What I found.
You're not giving me a break, and that's why.
Mr. Dennis, can I come in there real quick? I want to say something real quick.
So let me send my plan to you all because Dennis will have the email address. Let me send it to you.
Summarize the plan, Mr. Jackson.
Right,
but Amos.
Summarize what the plan.
Amos, let me jump in there real quick on something Sammy said. And Amos, I want to clarify something you said. Real quick on your question. It's Alex, but I'm sorry, I call it Amos. Alex, I want to say something to you real quick. You asked a question, and let me say this to you. Number one, you got to understand, if I was in the power of authority and was leading a country, what I would do would be different. So I can't sit there and tell you because I intend to create 5,000 jobs. I am not in the government. I could say that if I was
advocating for a party. Hold on now. You're advocating, telling the Liberian people.
Listen,
Alex,
I don't know why you guys are afraid of
government should look at that area. Let me finish because let me tell you one thing. It is easier when economists make recommendations to policymakers who happens to be the politicians, which is normal. But one thing economists don't always want to agree with is that policymakers will allocate resources based on priorities and needs, which we've seen across the country. So one thing I want us to understand, the reason why I tell you, it's funny that I heard Semi today referring to that of the poverty reduction plan, the agenda for transformation. When on this same platform, this same Sam Jackson has said that Madam Salih did not have an economic development plan. So to even hear him today talking about it, I will leave that with him. But let me, to answer your question, that is what I said. I could have said to you, let me,
I said that.
If someone will be interrupting me, if when people speaking, I listen, I come close to my camera when I'm speaking, you have to tell me what is the point. Let me, when I'm speaking, let me finish. I listen to you. I try to listen to you guys. When I'm speaking, let me speak too. So here's what I would say to you. Because the CDC government, we have a government, and whatever we're saying now, we are speaking in terms of our country. We are, while it's true, we want to identify what has happened in the past. We are sitting here today and saying what can be done to rescue or resuscitate the Liberian economy now. It is not what you will do tomorrow. It is not what you will do when you become president. So the notion that someone will sit here today, even Mr. Cummings, your analysis about Mr. Cummings, I think it was wrong. Because when Mr. Cummings gets to power, if he comes to realize that healthcare is of a priority, he might have wanted to invest in agriculture, but he could put more money to the healthcare sector. So I don't see nothing wrong with what he said. So I want us to get that straight up as economists. You guys can proceed.
All right.
Thank you. All right. No, thank you. And give me a chance. Let me move this discussion the way I want it, because I think we are jumping over the place, all over the place. And I don't want it to proceed like that. That's why I said, hold on. We're going to get to what we're trying to lay the foundation here before we proceed to what we can do to change things. Okay, so we're going to come to the plan. Mr. Jackson, when I was asking you about the plan, is just telling me that there is a poverty reduction. It's not a plan. You just telling me the name of it. Okay, and for someone to say we're going to look into this one, we're going to invest into agriculture, that too is not a plan. We want to see some numbers. But Mr. Jackson, you actually work in these areas. Okay, so the question I was asking was a comparative analysis, because we want to see. The title has been in every Liberian conversation, oh, this president was the best, or this economy was the best. So I want your objective analysis, since we have already spoken about those indicators. So let's look at these decades, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and now, and see where we did very poorly, well, or which decade we would think that we were doing a little better. Based on, and fortunately for us, you have worked in some of those areas. So tell me.
Again, you're putting me in an uncomfortable position.
That's what I do.
But hold on a second, okay? To prove to you that I did not work in all those administrations.
Some.
Okay? So you're making it seem like I'm a government boom, like I was always there for decades working in the government. Here is the fact. I worked for Talbot for 3 months. I worked for Samuel Doe 11 months. Charles Taylor 16 months. I never worked for Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. So let's get that clear. Because the way you're making it seem is like I'm sitting in these chairs and I'm crafting policies. I'm an economist. And what I have written, Alex, you've seen what I just wrote for this present government. I wrote something that is measurable. I took one aspect of our macroeconomic challenge, which is the monetary sector, the excess liquidity in the monetary sector, and the high rate of inflation, and the lack of financial inclusion. And I wrote a paper, a 44-page paper. And Alex, you can share that with George. I wrote that.
I don't want to stop you. I just want you to compare this era.
Just I want to get that clear. Look.
It's clear.
There was economic growth and economic stability in the 70s. Okay. I told you, but there was a great deal of patronage and corruption, and there was a great deal of inequality. So I can give you the numbers. If you want the numbers, I can tell you what the numbers were. You had 2.8% growth rate in most of the 70s, okay? That indicated there was a stabilization of the meteoric growth we had in the Talbot administration. But we had a narrow economy, a very narrow economy, where 72% of export earnings came from rubber and iron ore. Then you have to look at, in terms of the inequality, the Gini coefficient, you have to look at the gradations of the income. 5% of the people in the country were responsible for 90% of output. Because of that inequality, when you came to 1979, where the majority of the population, almost 90% of the population, living in abject poverty, and the life expectancy was just about under 50 years. Okay, that blew up. That blew up in 1980. You had a military that was underfed, that was undertrained, that was illiterate. You saw Master Sergeant Samuel Kayando could barely read. You saw that. You saw the people they called NOCOs. Okay, these NOCOs were taking care of the American Liberian elite. They were the drivers for them. They were the security for them. They were the houseboy for them. They went to get a girlfriend. That situation there was not sustainable. So compare it to the 80s. There was a drastic reduction in output during the 80s. In fact, every year that Doe was in power, there was a reduction in GDP. And that brought you to 1989. Between 1989 and 2003, you had 90% reduction in output, according to Steve Radcliffe, his paper, Economic Revitalization of the Liberian Economy. You saw that. So we came to Ellen. There was economic growth, and it averaged about 7% between 2006 and 2012. You also had revenue increase from 80 million to almost 600 million. But here is the problem. Aggregate demand was spurred by what? By oil mill, $150 million of income. Then the productive sector of the economy continued to be two primary commodity exports, rubber and iron ore. And then we did not build a resilient healthcare system. When Ebola came in 2014, after just a dozen cases of Ebola, the entire healthcare system, collapsed under the weight of only 12 Ebola cases. Liberia had almost 5,000 deaths in Ebola. Since 2014, up to the time that Ellen Salih left, the economy did not grow by more than 2%. Then on top of that, Dennis, on top of that, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and her people, they criminally, diabolically infused $16 billion into an economy with a growth rate of less than 2%, but the money supply increased by 77% cumulatively. In economics, there's something called the QTM, the quantitative theory of money. That is a close linear relationship between the economic rate and the money supply. Let me finish, John Lobbo. Can you just be,
Go ahead, Mr. Jackson. You have 1 minute to conclude.
Okay.
There was a close linear relation. There's a close linear relationship between economic growth rate and the money supply. And Ellen and her people, they criminally did that. How do I know? 5 people, including the central bank governor, the deputy, and other people in the banking institution, the central bank, they were indicted for this criminal enterprise that Mr. Lobbo continued to support.
Then
Okay.
now,
Can I ask them a few questions and clear the air today using the facts here?
go ahead. You have the floor.
I like the conversation as proceeding. Mr. Jackson, so definitely given what you just said under the UP government, you talk about the economy and talk about our export, 2 major commodities, which was iron ore and rubber, that have been Liberia, not just now, which I agree we should think about the productive sector. But hold on 1 second real quick. I want to ask you one thing. Before I state it, did you actually just say that as of 2013, after the Ebola, that the UP government, the economy under Ellen did not grow above 2%? Yes or no, sir? I don't want no explanation.
Yes, from the figures.
Okay, finish that. Semi, just hold on. Don't worry. Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
great.
Yes.
And I will agree with you on one thing you said earlier. It is true from 2006 to 2012. Liberia growth rate averaged at 7%. That is the truth. Yeah. In 2006, it grew above by 7.5. Now hold on, Semi. This is the IMF, the World Bank report on Liberia. Most recent. I printed this yesterday. You see, it is easy to. So in all fairness, Semi, let's go to the data here. According to the World Bank, it said in 2014, the regional Ebola crisis and a sharp drop in global commodity prices disrupt Liberia recovery. The economy contracted average rate of 0.8% per year during 2014 to 2016, or 3.2% in GDP growth. So you lie here, Semi. Okay. What I've said to you, Sam, I have great deal of respect for you as well.
Okay, great.
Let me finish my statement.
No, but
let me finish.
No, because
you spoke. I didn't interrupt you. Let me. Oh, Sammy, can I finish? No, the IMF did not distinguish what it was. The World Bank didn't distinguish. Let me finish my statement. I didn't ask you to argue. Can I speak?
Mr. Jackson, let him finish.
Sammy. So the World Bank numbers is fraudulent. That's fine. If it is fraudulent,
it is fraudulent. It is fraudulent.
We'll leave it there. But let me finish now. Let me say something here real quick.
Here's
what I want to say. I like the conversation, Sammy. You talk about the infusion of some 16 billion by the UP government. I hope the moderators have a debate schedule. The way in which we'll proceed. If they want me to respond to that, because that's an allegation you just made, and I want to talk about it. But I figured out this debate was something different, but if it is part of it, I will respond. And I want to also say to you, Semi, that the Unity Party government did not, and I challenge challenge you. Infuse no 16 billion in the Liberian economy. I stand by that statement. It was not criminally done. I challenge you on that. And if we have to go there, we can go and explain the fact to the people. That is something, if you want us to have that conversation, I challenge you on that. Okay? I will rest my case for right now. Because I have the other, get it? Okay. And Semi, I have the central bank report here. So when you're talking, I have the central bank report here.
Mr. Lobbo, before you, I know you asked some questions. So I will come back to you and say, what is your point?
Yes, my point, Dennis. After 2013, the Liberian economy was one that was growing rapidly as of 2006. While it is true, I am not a big fan of using the GDP number to state the fate of the economy. It is true there were a lot of gains made by the UP government. It is true. We were growing rapidly. When you look at the UNDP report on post-conflict nations, Liberia was ranked hardly among countries like Uganda, DR Congo, other countries that have had war. We were far above all of them. When we come to growth, it is true the healthcare sector in 2013 being challenged by the Ebola. One thing I want for us to not forget here that I consistently continue to say, we must first know where we came from and know where we were and how we left it. In 2006, what was the healthcare system of Liberia like? Hospitals across the country, some were not even furnished, some were outdated, some of them were in terrible condition. So it is true, while investments was being made on renovating some of those healthcare sectors, the Ebola outbreak was one that was above the government capacity. So Ebola slowed down our economic growth. The economy grew by 3.2%. It grew above 2%. Now, Semi is saying to the Liberian people again today that the United Party government infused 16 billion in the economy, which I say it is a lie.
Thank you. Mr. June.
It was never legally through the central bank. That is my position on that.
Thank you. Mr. June, does it make any difference?
Okay, before I answer that question, I think the two guests had enough time, and I would just like to do something real quick. I think this is an economic and finance discussion. It's not a political one. And one of the purpose of this show or today or the whole business and economic forum is to bring Liberians together to discuss the economy. And I'm very frustrated by it because most Liberians they're not capable of even asking an economic question, much less answering one. So what I'm going to do here to address these two fine men is I'm going to give you some data, very quick data, which I think will help bring some perspective to this conversation. So I beg your indulgence.
Yeah, first, before you say, because that's a big charge that they are not able to hold an economic discussion, they can't answer economic.
Yes, and I stand by that. Again, yeah, I don't make any statement.
Yeah, give me an example. What do you mean?
Let me give you an example, okay? Every show that I've gone on, Mr. Lobbo is here, okay? I think this is our first encounter. He supports a party wholeheartedly. He thinks that party will bring development and growth to Liberia. I do not think so. He has the opportunity to find out why. He has the opportunity to critique me. He has the opportunity to prove to the world are listening that I don't know what I'm talking about. But instead, people going after, which I have to listen and ask more than we talk. That's why I always ask questions. So while even for me to get my question to him, it's a fight. So that's my frustration. We're discussing economics. If you tell me the country is growing, but the Eli Johnson-Sirleaf administration was good, better, I want to know why. What indicators are you using? But compared to what? You talk about
show us your numbers.
And before, that's why I want to share this real quick so we can settle it here, because when I look at the data, right? On our child stealer, there were higher growth than Eli Johnson-Sirleaf. So why will you say that child stealer government was the best government in Liberia? There's many reasons for growth. There are different kinds of growth. We already agreed that our discussion should center around the definition that the Human Development Index,
the HDI,
one of the most objective way to measure improvement. If we agree about that, right? Liberia Human Development Index on our Ellie Johnson Sellies 1.04, 0.041, 0.043. Let me put that in perspective. All right. Seychelles is 0.79. It's an island with no natural resources. Okay. Let's go. Botswana 72, Libya 70.70. So when you talk about the improvement, it said that because a few people got a little bit of job and the international community went to Liberia, that's not an economic conversation. So when you talk about growth, there were many periods, Mr. Lobbo, including from 1995 up to Ellie Johnson term, where the Liberia economy grew way faster than Ellie Johnson Sirleaf. So I don't think you can ever use that argument. Okay. So find another argument or that you can convince me that it was better. The human development index.
So Alex,
let Mr. Lobbo respond while you get your numbers to share with us.
Okay,
so let Mr. Lobbo respond to that. Mr. Lobbo, go ahead. Mr. Lobbo, are you hearing me?
Young Dennis, can I respond?
Let Mr. Lobbo respond. Mr. Lobbo, are you hearing me?
So Mr. Alex, here's my question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
When you cannot compare Liberia with Botswana. Botswana country. Because Botswana have been stable for the last 10 plus years. Liberia was not when Ellen took over.
Okay.
If you want to, let me finish.
Hold on. Let me finish now. Argument now. Hold on.
No. You asked. You see. You said we can't. You want to hold. You said we can't have an economic
discussion. Now you're going to a diatribe. You ask a question. You're referring that I cannot. I'm answering your question. So let me respond to you. I'm responding to you. You said, when am I comparing Liberia to? This is one of the reasons why I told you. Liberia under LA was post-conflict nation. Okay.
You refer to Namibia. Namibia and Liberia. Namibia have been stable for over 50 years.
Okay.
Can I finish, sir?
Okay, let's go. Hold on now. Hang on. Let's go to Angola.
Can I finish speaking? Can I finish?
Mr. Lobbo.
Can I finish speaking?
All right.
Let me finish speaking, then you speak. Can I finish speaking? Can I finish first?
All right.
Okay, let me finish. It is true you said, and we all agree, there are a lot of different measures that people use to measure the economy. Mm-hmm. The World Bank has its own document, which the World Bank used to measure economy. While it's true we said that, and all of us here agree that one thing we want to look at is the Human Development Index. Now, what I say on the LA, for us to look at the Human Development Index on the LA, then let's look at the educational sector on the whole. What was it like prior to LA? That is how you should have the conversation. What was the if you're going to be interrupting me, then there's no reason for me to speak.
Ask me a question.
So let me finish. Now, what happened with the educational sector? How many schools were there prior to LA? What was done under LA? We saw decentralization of the educational sector. We saw community colleges open across the country. Can I finish my statements?
Mr. Lobbo, you are.
If you want to speak, let me wait and you speak.
Yeah. Okay, let me speak.
Go ahead and speak. I'll wait because I'll keep getting interrupted. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, you were.
Go ahead. You want to say something? Go ahead. I'll wait for you when you finish.
I'm talking now. We were talking about HDR. You are going to education. Are you saying because of low education? What's the connection?
Dennis, HDR is not only education. There's a lot of different factors that factor into the Human Development Index. You look at infant mortality. You look at life expectancy. So HDR is not only one thing. What was life expectancy prior to Ellen? It was, I think, 35. Before Ellen left power, what was it? 55. So are you saying nothing was done? How many, what was Liberia education literacy rate? What was it prior to Ellen? What is it when she left? That is how we should look at it if we want to be realistic. Okay. So to take Liberia and say, oh, Liberia will be unfair to the country because technically we've not been doing justice in our country. Botswana been stable for the last 10, 15 years. Liberia have not been stable. How do we make that comparison? Will not be fair here.
Mr. Lobbo,
Dennis,
so
can I respond, please? Dennis?
Hold on, Mr. Jackson. Let Ellis end his thought.
Okay, because you guys, like I said, the purpose of me coming here is I want to learn something new. I want you to educate me why, where your ideas are, where your thinking are. Is it that because Ellen Johnson Sirleaf had more improvement, all right, than the previous president, that means that she was better? Is that your logic?
Are you asking me or are you making a statement?
I'm asking you a question.
Are you asking me? Looking at year to year, regime to regime. But that's why I ask you, so the video is breaking in. I ask you, are you asking me? The video keep breaking in. That is why you see me stop and ask you, are you asking me?
Let me ask my question again.
Great, but your video is breaking in. Go ahead.
My question is that because there was an improvement when on Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, 12 years of governance, improvement from what she inherited. Does that mean that she had a good economic plan, economic development and improvement? Is that your logic?
No. That is not my argument. No.
Okay. That's not my second
question. That's not my argument.
Answer the second question. One more question.
Let me finish now. You asked me a question. Let me answer.
Okay, well, I have another question. Right?
Let me hold on. No, before you ask another question, let me answer your first question. Here's my argument on Ellen. My argument is that what she inherited was in a bad state.
Okay, so that is not your logic.
Are you breaking in?
Oh, God. Okay, so that your logic isn't that because Ellen Johnson Sirleaf did marginally better than her predecessor, that means she was a good president.
No. You asked two different questions. Here's my question. Here's my argument to you. My argument is, as a country, under Ellen 12 years, we made progress given where we came from. And she set the standard for us to continue to succeed. You heard me telling you that there needs to be more done in the production.
And I'm taking the side and saying, no, she did not economically.
Okay, that's another argument we can have. But I mean, you have not brought the numbers to show that.
And that's what I'm trying to tell you now. So I've asked you questions.
So then we have that
question. I can do that. If you have a question for me, you can post your question. But we have to learn how to have a discussion.
But let's get some perspective. Let's continue to make it. It's not if it's going to be you and I, that's fine. Let's get some perspective as well. Let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me just correct Mr. Lobbo, and let me explain to him that there are two kinds of GDP. There is real GDP and there is nominal GDP. The nominal GDP is the output times the price index, okay? And that is a guess from the World Bank. The real
it's
GDP,
a guess?
Yeah, it's a guess. Of course it's a guess. It's a guess. It's a guess estimate because we don't have a national income accounting that is done directly for Liberia. The World Bank and IMF, those are all guess estimates. And those are all
Go ahead, Sammy.
Let me finish. These are all based upon simulation, okay? And they're all based upon matrices, okay? Okay, analytics, predictive analytics, and that's a guess. You can take that to the bank. Maybe you learned something new today, okay? So let's go to look at Liberia's real GDP growth according to the Central Bank of Liberia, which is the national authority. In 2014.
Which one is Central Bank report?
Of 2014, real GDP, okay?
Hold on.
But don't say hold on. I'm not gonna hold on. Just
I get a report. I get Central.
Yeah, but mark it down. Just mark it down. Okay.
Go ahead. Keep going ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Chance to go on.
Yes. The economic growth rate was 0.3%. Okay. In 2015, the economic growth rate was 0.5%. In 2016, the economic growth rate was negative 1.6%. Okay. And then in 2017, they said it was 2.5. And then in 2018, listen to me, this is the central bank, they said 3%. Did you have a 3% growth rate last year? Of course not. That's why I said Mr. Lobbo doesn't understand national income accounting. Because if you know anything about national income accounting.
So can I answer, Semi? And you ask me a question, can I answer you now?
Let me finish. No. Let me finish.
Let him finish.
Let me finish. If you know anything about national income and accounting, and you know anything about GDP as a calculation, the expenditure method,
No, just go ahead.
Plus the consumption, plus investment, plus government spending, okay, plus X, which is the export, and minus the M, which is the import, you will know that there is no way Liberia's economic growth rate was anywhere near 3% since 2014. No way. No way. Absolutely no way. No way.
Okay.
Okay, let me respond to you, Semi.
No,
let me respond to your argument.
Hold on, before you come in, Lobbo. I think we've already identified that GDP alone does not answer the question, so we went to HDI. So in essence,
so but hold on now. Listen, this is what I continue to say. Samuel Jassy is reading a number from the Central Bank report of 2018. What Samuel Jassy have not told us here is that which one of the Central Bank who was president in 2018? It was George Weah's Central Bank. Semi, you need to also acknowledge. Do you recall the report that came out from the CBL in October where the Central Bank had to take down her website because the number was wrong? But the government.
That's the point. That's the point.
Let me finish. Do you agree to that? Can you acknowledge that first?
That's my point. That's my point.
Okay, so hold on now. So if you agree, then that means are you agreeing that the number you now using is flawed from them?
Okay.
That's what I said. All the numbers are fraudulent, including the number that you gave me. All the numbers are fraudulent. That's what I said.
And this is what.
Okay, Semi, hold on. Let me finish my point on that. I just wanted to spread the record for that because.
Mr. Lobbo.
But Dennis, if Semi asks me a question and say I don't know something, can I explain? I want to state the facts before I talk about it. So if you can't give me the chance to respond to Semi, then what's the point? Semi asked me a question. Let me answer.
Semi didn't ask you a question. I was talking and you interrupted me. Go ahead.
If Semi asked me, the video is sticking. There's a slow time for me to hear you guys.
Is your connection, Mr. Lobbo? Your connection.
And I want to acknowledge one thing. The video is sticking. I'm happy. So at the time you speak, I can't get you guys. So hold on. So that's why when I want to respond is how. So Semi, here's my fight on that. The Central Bank original report that came out in 2018 in October, they shut the website down because that same report, the Central Bank told us that there was some $170 million plus budget shortfall. The government got mad, they took it down. So now you are reading a report that was redone to favor the government and you are using it. But let me finish my statement. So don't come here and say you do not understand, except what you're trying to tell me, that international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank that we use, that you've been alluding to, that it is a credible financial institution that countries will rely on for data. So if the IMF cannot be trusted, given your assertion, if the World Bank data cannot be trusted, then to me, I see no reason why we should criticize any government. Because all the data we really have today, that all of us put in, was once upon a time compiled by some financial institution. And I think the IMF and the World Bank are the two most credible financial institutions. And if that data you refer to it today as fraudulent, then technically I have no reason to argue with you then. If that's your analysis, if the IMF and World Bank data is fraudulent, then there's no point. Okay. Technically. Then use your Central Bank data that were prepared to favor George Weah. Okay. So let's go from that. Use that one.
George Lobbo.
Hold on, Sam. Hold on, Sam. Because Mr. Lobbo, are you finished?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, don't say. That's okay, why
I said go ahead.
Okay. Hold on, Mr. Jackson. Hold on. I don't want for us to go back and forth and debating government. This is not economics. If we are debating, George Weah and Ellen, then we are leaving the economic argument. Okay, or which
that's what I thought.
Yeah. So the premise I was trying to lay now is we talk about the HDI, and so you raise an issue. Ellen was trying to push you on that, Mr. Lobbo, about because you keep saying, like the Ellen Sirleaf government did better because of what Ellen inherited, right? So I see that's the back and forth. That's the crush of the back and forth between you and Mr. Jackson. So if that's the case, let's go to the numbers. We said GDP was not giving us the accurate or numbers, so we went to HDI. So your argument, why you think that President Salif or her 12 years were better, as Ellis asked you, is because where the country came from. So there was some improvement. Is that your, let me repeat Ellis' question to you. Is that your reasoning? Is that why you
Yes, my reasoning. Yes, I answered the question very clear to Alex. What I said have been very, very clear. I said as a country, given Liberia's history, we can go back and look at the 70s, look at the 80s, look at the 90s. Nobody that have done more in terms of decentralization than Ellen. So on the basis of that, I'm glad that Samuel Jackson said, given the policy that Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, some of the reform that Ellen initiated for the country, on that basis, I said she have done well as a country. She has set the foundation for economic growth that we could build on. So because of that, given what she inherited and what she did, on the basis of that, I've said that the Unity Party government did well. That is my statement on that. And I've not changed on that.
And where are the numbers to back that up?
When you refer to what are the numbers, let's look at the education sector now. What was enrollment prior to Ellen? How many community colleges did we have in Liberia prior to Ellen?
Okay. All right.
Today, you want me to name the counties that have community colleges? You want me to name how many vocational training centers were built? Right. Is that the argument?
Is that economic? The number of community colleges? Anyway, Ellis, go ahead.
Okay, again.
No. You asked me on the education sector. So is that not the education sector? No, let's go to Ellie. Okay, let's go to Ellie on the economic. Let's go to Ellie. Let's look at Ellie. What was done from foreign direct investment perspective on Ellie to create jobs? Under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, we saw the China mine come to Bon Mines. We saw the Sharon Veron plantation. Is that not the economy? Under Ellen, we saw Mills were referred to as the poverty doctor. Thank God Samuel Jackson talked about the poverty reduction strategy. What was it about?
Okay.
So is that not the economy?
No, I don't.
Let me finish. Under Madam Sirleaf, we saw the renovation of the port, which increased Liberia's revenue from 80 million to some 550 million. Is that not part of the economic growth? Okay. We saw many sectors created. We saw decentralization of financial institutions. We saw banks open across the country. That is in the private sector. Is that not the economy?
Okay, let's go ahead. Mr. Jackson, fix your camera, please. We want to see you.
Okay, Mr. Jai, again, this is an economic discussion, so please allow me to share my slides. Anybody has the right to do that because most of the claims people are making is baseless and they don't have any data to support it. If this was a political show, I agree, but this is an economic show, it's a finance show. In finance and economics, you deal with numbers. So I'm going to share my data again to refute what this young man said and educate him on what economic development and economic growth is. He mentioned number of schools open, and you are absolutely right. Number of schools is not an economic indicator. It may be a social indicator. It may be a good thing for the country socially, but that's not what we're here to discuss. He mentioned also Liberia had just come from war, so therefore the Human Development Index was low. When I look at the numbers here, I look at countries.
No, I didn't say that.
All right, then let's move to the next one. Then, if you didn't say that, then thank you.
Because no, a lot of countries. I said let's look at the HDMI. I didn't say that. Don't.
All right, fine. Like I said, if you ask the right question, or I think I would I'll give you a pass on that because that doesn't hold any water because there were countries that went through longer periods of war that have worse civil crisis. That HDI is still higher than on Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, so she can't use that number. And we can use that number. So let's go to GDP growth because we want to say
so that. Where are you using it? Where are we getting the data from, if I may ask?
Oh, it's the data from the United Nations. This is the HDI for all African countries. Hold on.
So Semi said the World Bank data we should not use it again? You can use so the World Bank data is fraudulent?
Lobbo, you can use whatever data, just bring it on. Once all this data is coming from either the World Bank, the Central Bank of Liberia, or the IMF. I don't create data. I don't think anybody goes through all this process. This is like United Nations data, okay, that all the countries. If you look at here, you will see the countries with the highest HDI are the ones in green and the lighter colors, and the country with the lowest are the ones in red. Look at Liberia, okay? Even Congo, which has one of the still going on with war in Congo, right? The Democratic Republic of Congo is better than Liberia. So that argument doesn't hold any water. And so what I'm trying to say here is it's okay to come and talk. And that's why I hear from most of Liberians, especially the quote unquote politicians. They come out and they make this claim. They say, oh yeah, we're gonna develop this country. My question is, as an intellectual, someone who spent time looking at research, looking at data, tell me how. Then we can support you. Let's go back to the GDP, because that's let's clarify that once and for all year. Okay. Honor Eli Johnson Sirleaf came to power, what, 2003? 2006 to 2018, 12 years. Everybody can see that on the screen, right? So let's go down and look at 2006, before 2006, and then look at the GDP rate and growth rate in Liberia. And then we solve it. So this is Liberia GDP going back from 2010, and we can go further. Let's go 25 years. So let's go back all the way here, right? This is 2006 when Eli Johnson came. The highest GDP growth rate she had was 9.4%. If we went back all the way here to 1997, we had 1.106% GDP rate. Up until this was all under war and under dictator. And this data is coming from what? Central Bank of Liberia. So let's shut up with the GDP growth under Eli Johnson Sirleaf, because these are the numbers. If she wants to compare GDP and talk about improvement, that argument does not hold water. So talk about something else. So I will stop there, and you tell us, and let the politician tell. I mentioned Cummins. Look, Cummins may be a very good administrator for Coca-Cola, but we're not building sugar water in Liberia. If he wants to be president, it requires more than just coming and talking about your background in corporation. We all work in corporation. If I were running for office, I wouldn't say because I work at JP Morgan, I work at Bank of New York, I was an executive or I was a semi-executive, that means it qualifies me. What the Liberian people wants to hear, they have real issues. They have an issue of where we don't have banks in Liberia that are controlled by Liberians. We don't have industries. Our budget, we can't even make our budget of $1 billion. We're the oldest African country with the smallest budget. Let Mr. Cummins, Mr. Ure, all these people who run their mouth on, in politics, let them come and say, all right, we are 500 million. Here is how I'm going to get it to 700 million. Then we are the tacticians and we are the analysts will go and see if that's true or false. Mr. Lobbo work in corporate America. No company is going to come and say, oh, I'm going to have growth. The analyst is going to ask you how you're going to get this growth. If Apple says next year we're going to double our market share, they can show you. They say we're going to have 10% in China. We're going to have 20% in India. And the analysts can kind of verify that. So what you find in Liberia with these plans is basically a prayer to make Liberian people feel good, to tell you, say, poverty reduction. What poverty have reduced in Liberia under Eli Johnson Sirleaf? In fact, I'll make the argument poverty went up. They see them with poor plan. What's the data to support that plan?
Okay, Alex, can I ask you, Alex?
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Between the period of 2006 and 2015, name me one country in West Africa that attracted, and listen to my question, that attracted over 10 billion in foreign direct investment.
Okay. I can give you that number. A lot of countries, Ghana. I'm
asking you, name me the countries.
Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal. Go look at the numbers. All those countries attract billions of dollars per year. If you combine,
I said billion. I didn't say million.
Listen now, you asked me the question, and what I'm seeing here, you can go on and verify it. Nigeria gets what, $10 or so billion in foreign direct investment. What do you think Chevron oil doing in Nigeria? So again, don't talk about that argument on the Eli Johnson Sirleaf.
Okay, I asked you the question. Here's why I asked you the question, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about what was done. The reason I asked that question, it was simple. I know Ghana attract that. Senegal, you call 10 Nigeria. Times. Let me finish now. Mm-hmm. you spoke, right?
Yeah.
So I want to clear something about Cummings. I do not defend Cummings. Cummings is the standard of the ANC. However, I get it. He's running for office. It is your right to ask the question about him. But here's what I would say. I think Alexander Cummings has said a couple of things, and I will just quote him. He has said that what he intends to do to expand the Liberian economy will be to diversify the economy. He talked about the tourism sector a lot. He said he intended to invest in some of the creating low-tech, low-skills jobs. However, maybe he will give the details of that plan. I want for us to leave Cummings and leave any of them out for right now. Cummings is not here. But I think that is strong. That's a right. So let's leave Cummings out. Let me just answer this question about investment.
Okay, Dennis.
I don't cower to anybody. I can talk about whoever.
Yeah, no, let me answer this question here real quick on this. Okay, I asked you the question for one reason.
Alex, what I said.
Alex,
or what then ask the question.
Alex,
yes, what I'm saying.
So here's my question. What are the conditions under which a nation attract foreign direct investments?
Oh, there's a lot of things.
I asked the question. That's what I want to hear. What are the conditions?
Right. Every indicator that I have read and every analysis that I know that for African countries, foreign direct investment has been bad. So when you talk about foreign direct investment, it's like the worst thing that happened to Liberia. Because you talk about this 16 billion that went to Liberia. Did they increase the HDI? Did they increase the standard of living? No. So many politicians, all right, who don't know anything about economics or finance, they use these words to gain vote and to show intelligence in economic and finance. If I were advising them, I would tell them we should stop foreign direct investment and start concentrating on our domestic investment, because that's the kind of investment that will create jobs and raise the Liberian living standard. And to go back to your question with Cummings, where President Liberia, including
hold on now. You answered the question. You did not answer my question.
Let me come in.
You did not answer my question, Alex. I asked you. What are the Senator Dawson? I think you're listening to my question, right? My question is, what are the conditions under which a nation attracts foreign direct investment? That is my question, sir.
Well, that question, Alex, hold on, Mr. Lobbo.
Yes.
The question, I don't want to say it's not relevant, but in a way it's not.
No, it is relevant.
Yeah, because
we discussed the economy, they say it's not relevant. Foreign direct investment, Senator Dawson, is foreign direct investment not part of the economy?
No. Here is why.
Let me help you out.
Hold on, Alex. And I want us to go into what we can do now, because we have spent an hour.
You ask me questions, I ask a question. If I ask you my question. Answer my question, then I will go follow up.
The first thing I would tell you is that.
Hold on, Alex. Hold on. Before
I didn't ask for the. Listen, I didn't ask you for the effect of what.
Let me answer the question and keep.
Attract foreign direct investment.
All right.
That's all I said.
All right. So let me answer the question. And just as I gave you time to answer your question, succinctly, give me the time.
Okay.
Right?
I'm listening.
I just said here that foreign investment does not make any sense. It's bad for developing countries. And there's a lot of studies that have been done, including Global Witness. In fact, when the Metal Steel went to Liberia project, Global Witness condemned the transaction. All right. So when you're asking me if the conditions for foreign direct investment too is that's a relative question. Peace, one of them, minerals, one of them, exploitation is one of them. So all those conditions will attract foreign investment. But the real question is it good or bad? And I will tell you, it's not. And anytime to Liberians, when you're any politician who don't have anything else to say, but talk about diversification, ask them how.
Okay, Dennis, let me come in.
Gentlemen, and let me ask a question.
No, answer your question. Go ahead.
Can I respond to the man? I asked a question.
No, Mr. Lobbo, that's why I was stopping you, because this is not a question and answer. I wanted you to build a context around what you were saying. So go ahead and make your point.
No, Dennis. If I ask a question, maybe you don't know my answer. Let me ask it.
Hold on, let me finish. What I'm saying is you are asking for conditions. Just go ahead and make your point, because if you talk about conditions and all this and it's become question and answer between.
No, I didn't ask that.
Then we are leaving out other people because I want us to segue into what we can do now. The time is fast spent, so we can be going back and forth. So let Lobbo finish with his context. Put a context around the question, make your point, and then we go to the next panelist. Go ahead, Mr. Lobbo.
So here's why I asked the question. When we talk about the economy, the reason why I asked the question was very simple. One of the driving forces to attract foreign direct investment is stability. Stability. The nation must be stable. That has to do with security. It has to do with confidence in the financial sectors. So for a country like Liberia, I was not asking about, so if I had asked that, then you answer. The reason why I brought that to your attention was that a country like Liberia, to meet those indicators, to be able to have investors coming to the country, we can sit back and say, okay, how many jobs were created? That was not what I asked. But we at least see the initial stage of those investments that was in Liberia. We saw the Veron, like I listed, the Accel Mentor, the China Mine, the logging companies, all those. When I
Mr. Lobbo, let's look at this.
You keep interrupting me.
Yeah, because what you are saying is like we already know.
If I can't have the time to speak, then you go ahead and speak.
No, let's look at the.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Dennis. I'm done speaking. Go ahead. I'm out. I'm not speaking. Go ahead. I don't want to say anything. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis,
let's look before you.
Because if I can, go ahead.
Before you, but you said you give me the chance again. I'm talking.
That's why I said, Dennis, go ahead. I just want to go ahead.
I'm going ahead and you're still talking.
Go ahead.
Because this is, let's look at outcome. It's like you
I'm getting you I said go ahead because I told you the video is still.
Okay, Dennis, can I go ahead?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Look, everything has to be empirical. It has to be based upon numbers. And those numbers.
Fix your video. Fix your video, Mr. Jackson.
Okay. And those numbers have to come from somewhere real. Mr. Lobbo has never sat down in a World Bank or an IMF meeting ever in his life.
Mr. Jackson, don't make those kind of statements. Just go ahead with your point.
No, because I want to tell you the origins of those estimates.
You don't know that, so just go.
But let me tell you the origins of those numbers.
Right.
The IMF and the World Bank people sit down with us, right? Liberia does not have a system of national income accounting. The last time they did any kind of thing, whether we decided what the base years were, we still using GDP at 1998 prices. So what happens, let me educate you guys on this. The World Bank, the IMF sit down with the Liberian authorities, and there are three figures. And then those three guesses is the average of those three guesses is what you get out as a combination of Liberian authorities, the IMF, and the World Bank. We just completed a household income and expenditure survey in 2016. You cannot calculate GDP without calculating or without knowing what your household income and expenditure survey, because you have to figure out what that C part of the GDP calculation is. Okay. Now let's go to reality in terms of output. Mr. Lobbo said they attracted $16 billion. That's a fraudulent figure because even Ellen herself admitted that these are planned investments over a period of 25 years. So let's look at the composition of those investments. 95% of those investments are in the extractive sector. They're in rent-seeking industries that don't produce jobs, don't produce income, don't transfer technology, and really don't do anything to improve the socio-economic conditions of the country. If Ellen attracted $16 billion of investments, let's see from Mr. Lobbo's own GDP calculation in any year where he can show me that the quantum of foreign direct investment at any time in the Ellen administration, if it hit $1 billion, I will never come on Facebook again. Okay? Number two, When you talk about creating jobs and income, you have to have the output and the output indicators. What is the output indicator? What is the proportion of the population that's living below $1 per day? And Ellen's own figure, okay, the core welfare indicator questionnaire of 2012 says 56.3% of the population of the country living on $1 per day. The UN, the UNHDR, Human Development Report, says 84% of Liberians living under less than $1.25 a day. Okay, so you have to look at.
So what's your point? Conclude that, your main point.
My main point is that Mr. Lobbo needs to understand, and the rest of the people that are listening to us need to understand, that these numbers don't mean a darn thing if they don't improve the human condition. And the human condition in Liberia was improved because you came from peace, from war to peace. But it's not because of any magic that Ellen did, because it was the automaticity. Let me explain what automaticity means.
We understand, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, automaticity is when people, they are starting their lives. They are rebuilding their lives. They're rebuilding their homes. They're sending their children to school. They are consuming. And then UNMIL comes in and spending $160 million a year. You will see economic growth rate. You will see improvement in the human condition. But what happens after UNMIL leaves? After UN-related activities are reduced, and then you see the dynamics of the economy coming to forbear, right? Which is a what? Your narrow economy.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you. Okay, we have said it all. Now, and I want to welcome back my co-host, Mr. Asuni Sie. Mr. Sie, I know there were some technical issues there, but thanks for coming back. Let's end the discussion tonight as to, based on where we are now, what can we do? How do we grow the economy? What are the things that need to be done? How, if we were advising today's government, what are some of the things we will be saying? And let me welcome my co-host, Mr. Asuni Sie. Mr. Sie, you have the floor.
Dennis, thank you. And I'm glad to be back. The technical issue, like you rightly said, has been resolved, and I'm back to the table. And I even like the section that we are about to go into. The problems have been discussed, identified. We have called names of individuals who were the players, the high and low. We went around the history of the issue. Now, going forward, where do we start? And that would be my question. And I want our panelists to give us what the focus should be. What should be the key? When I say key, the one that we will touch and that will be like a catalyst to all the other components of our economy in terms of growth and development. And on this one, I will start with Mr. George Lobbo. George, go ahead.
I'll start at every question. I want to wait, let them speak. I don't want to speak. I will wait for them.
All right.
I'll say I've started every question, so you go. I can say
He doesn't want to go.
Alex.
All right, thank you. And, and that's a very good question, because most times we discuss what happening or what has happened in Liberia, and nobody wants to talk about solution, because what solutions are hard. That's why nobody wants to talk about it. And economics and finance, they're very difficult. So what people want to talk about is they want to generalize and talk politics, because it's easier to tell you, say, hey, man, you're not good. And it's more difficult for me now to tell you what measure am I using. And when it comes to solution, like many Liberians don't have, they don't have a clue. The government you go to the most basic thing in Liberia, such as library. Okay, whether it's on an allegiance leave and now, we don't have. I would argue 2 libraries in Liberia. Now, a government that cannot even build and maintain library, functional library. You ask,
Alex, Mr. Lobbo, there's something going on with your video, because there's something going.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time. Go ahead. That's why I'm saying be audible a little bit. I want to hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So a government that cannot build and maintain 2 libraries in a country that have been around for 1847, with all of their Harvard courses graduate, and with all of their political savviness, they can build and maintain 2 libraries. I can give you a plan because it's impossible. Because it's difficult to build something. It's difficult to maintain it. When you build a library, where would the books come from? How will you pay? What would be, what are the rules? Somebody has to do that. And when it comes to Liberians, unfortunately, people don't want to do that. We just went through the numbers, and I hope this helps a lot of people who just bring out number like, oh, we had a pastor growth on an early Joseph study. You can simply go and Google what was the growth rate. That's all I do for a living, is I analyze things. I don't have an opinion on whether Ellie is good or the other person is good, or I like George Weah or I hate the other person. All I look at is what the numbers are saying about them. And I will hope that many Liberians will start taking this objective view to make the country. That's the first place we need to start. And when we say that, what do we mean? When we look at our government, the way it's structured, for 172 years, it's been a failed state, a banana republic. Do we think that government is capable of, transformation and development? If it couldn't do it on an Ellie Johnson Sirleaf, on a Charles Taylor, on a Doe, on a Torber, I'm talking about in terms of human development index, because that's the number we should concentrate on. Let's get Liberia Human Development Index number from 42, what it is, which is really atrocious. Okay, let's get it to 60. Let the next Liberian candidate tell me that.
How can we get it there? Can you tell us how?
Good.
We want to hear the plans.
And I did some work. The first thing we need to do is we need to reorganize our government. The way it is designed for failure. All the money that goes into government, it passes right through it goes to the government, and it goes into the pockets of the politician who holds offices, like the senator, the representative, the president, that travel. So if you have almost the budget of $500 million, and $300 million of that money is wages, and then let's say maybe the top, I would say 20% of that wage that's being paid is by the highest people. So in the case of Liberia, the presidency alone, I see from the budget, gets over $10 million, and you don't have a library. And this will honor Ellie Johnson Sirleaf too. So let's get a record clear. All right. So with all of the foreign direct investment, with all of the harbor and all of this stuff, if you can't build a library, you can't build a functioning public hospital in Liberia, one good functioning hospital where yourself will go. You have president, you got minister of health when they want to extract.
So Alex, are you proposing a political decision or a political solution to Liberia's problem?
Yeah. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get Liberia's brightest politician. I'm not talking about what you call the self-want-to-be politicians. People who know, who can, if I tell you, say Guinea, what's the system in Guinea? You can tell me. If I tell you, say Estonia, what's the political structure in Estonia? You know it. That's the kind of people who have researched. They've written papers on political systems. They know different structure. You have to get them together. That's what Rwanda did. That's what Ghana did. So when you see Ghana is improving, Ghana rewrote the whole entire constitution. Okay, Liberia wants to emanate other people, but they don't want to do the job. So the first thing, one of the things you do is, I will propose you get rid of the presidency and the vice presidency, and be a country where it's governed by a small council, ruling council with left. You do that alone, you save about at least $50 million a year from the budget, and you take that money and put it in schools and hospitals. Why do we need a president? We've already done. Nobody can tell me an economic argument for the president of Liberia. If anybody can tell me that, like I said, I would be very, very happy to know that. Tell me the economic that you're paying somebody $20 million every year, right? For the travel, for the pay, for the wherever, the bodyguards. Tell me what in your HGI is down, your GDP is down. So why are you paying this person? In corporate America, you pay a CEO $400,000 and that CEO don't perform, you kicking out. So we don't need a president. Most of the top positions in Liberia, we need to eliminate it, starting with the president. All the wars in Liberia has been because of the presidency. So why would you want to keep something that everybody who wants to be or wants
this is tough.
That's the first political.
We need a
on this December 24th. That let George Weah be the last executive president. The president of Liberia has too much power, and anybody who has that kind of power will abuse it. They can control the budget. I just heard during Christmas the president went out and said that the buses will carry people for free. What a silly decision. Why is it silly? from an analytical standpoint, what you've just done, somebody who has a taxi cab now, who spent their money, went and took a loan, you took business for them. You won't be the president, you won't be the head of the bus company, and you won't be making decisions. You have to hire the mayor, you have to hire the sheriff, you have to hire the police director. What country in the world does that? So we start with our political structure, we rip it apart. Then we start with something that we look at countries like the Norwegian country. Look at their president. Do you think they fly private jets? Do you think they have bodyguards like a poor country? The president of China uses Air China to travel. The president of China makes $20,000 a year. Go look it up. He has the party, the country itself. That's why you have more billionaires and millionaires created in China than any country. And China per capita was just like that, bro, in 1960. So again, we are
let me stop you. Let me stop you there for a minute.
Maybe next week we'll come on more.
Yeah,
let's start with that.
These ideas are too, and they are strange for us. You are saying get rid of the presidency, but let me go to Mr. Lobbo. Are you ready now, or we can go to Sam? Mr. Lobbo, you falling asleep?
Let me speak. I will speak here. Listening to that.
Dennis, let me jump in here and read something from Sam so he can come in. Mr. Jackson, there is this economic review that was done by a group called the Center for Economic Development in November of 2007. And the goal of this research was to revive economic growth in Liberia. This is something, if we don't have, we can share with you, but there's something in there that speaks to my question that I asked earlier. Since Liberia have gone through war, Liberia economy needed to be revived so that development can start taking place. And there's one thing they said there that I want to read for you. They said that the single highest priority for the economy is rebuilding infrastructure, and especially roads, which are crucial to nearly every aspect of Liberia's recovery. Maintaining security, connecting farm to market roads, creating jobs, opening concession areas, reducing costs for manufacturing, and effectively delivering basic health and education services. The reason I bring this up is that I asked Jones earlier, where do we start? And this group is telling us that we should start with roads. Because if you even want to start with health, you need to go in the Leeward County. How do you get there? If you talk about schools, you want to go to the Leeward County. How do you get there? It will be through the roads. So that's why I asked the question earlier. So what do you think?
First of all, are you talking about Steve Radley's paper?
That is correct.
Thank you, man. I read that 1,000 times, okay?
Okay.
But it's not a group that wrote that. It's Dr. Radley, Steve Radley.
Thank you for the correction. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So look, the fundamental problems, look, we have two types of problems with the economy in Liberia. We have the structural problems, and then we have the dynamic problems, okay? The structural problems are problems that we need to address in terms of that are systemic in nature. For example, the issue of roads, okay? There was a constraints analysis that was done in 2013 for us to get that MCC grant. Samuel 12 was on that team, Money Captain, and others. They found out that the two binding constraints to economic growth were roads and electricity. Only 5.9% of the roads are paved, and less than 10% of households today have access to electricity or on the electricity grid, right? So the African, the dynastics on infrastructure, African infrastructure dynastic, it says that if we don't close the infrastructure deficit, we're going to have serious problems, okay? But in order to do that, and Sony, you need money. You need lots of money, okay? So Liberia does not have the ability to go to the international private finance capital market and raise debt so it can build infrastructure. And Liberia is too corrupt. Its fiscal affairs are too mismanaged for it to access private finance capital. So Liberia is left with no option but to use the multilateral financing, which is typically the World Bank, the African Development Bank, okay? And maybe some bilateral loans. The most important thing for Liberia to move ahead, number one, is to fix the human capital. Like Alex said, the human capital means we're bringing the best on the planet, the best Liberians on the planet, not people who went to some school in Liberia and came to America or went to China, get a 9-month master's. They have no experience in running anything in their lives. They have never run an institution. They have never worked in any corporate area. And we're going to give them this great responsibility to be responsible for the lives of 5 million people. That would never work. That has been the limitations of our human capital development. If you look at 95% of the people who have run Liberia in the last, I don't know how many years, these are people with no corporate experience, with no Fortune 500 experience, with no great hospital experience. There's a Liberian girl at Johns Hopkins. She's the top epidemiologist in America. That is the girl that should be running the healthcare system in Liberia. You got people like my cousin.
I disagree.
But let me finish.
No, the healthcare system.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Let me finish.
Wait now, Joy. Why you get?
You haven't given me a chance. You haven't given.
If you interrupt me, you keep going. Let him just speak. Then you
I
can
just
speak.
wanted to suggest something because the actual person to run the healthcare is me.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Then you got somebody like my daughter, who is dean of students at William and Mary College. She has a PhD and a JD. She runs an educational system with a budget in the hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? With an endowment of $1 billion plus, okay? Then you have, I'm just giving you from my own family, okay? And the other Liberians with higher qualification, but I'm giving you my own family.
Thank you, sir.
No, I'm not finished yet. You see, you always cut me down. The other person will talk for 5 minutes. Let me talk. You never time them. You
okay, how many minutes? How many minutes you want?
That man spoke for 7 minutes. He spoke for 7 minutes. I was 7 minutes. So let me finish. Because I speak strong and my words are strong. You don't want to take it. So let me finish.
Mr. Jackson, is the fact that you can leave the point and you go to certain things. That's why it is.
You asked me if I read it, and I answer you. I read it, and I agree that we need roads and electricity. I agree with that. So we finished that topic already. I'm ending now. This is okay. This is my finale. I don't have all night to be here. My wife is waiting for me. I don't have to be with you all day long. Okay? I'm a married man. My wife is here. Okay. So let me tell you something. Okay. My nephew, senior vice president, okay, JP Morgan Chase, Christopher New York Jr. from the University of Chicago. That is the boy that should be the principal financial advisor to Liberia. Okay? Or boy like Alex Jones from Wall Street. Alex Jones. We should be sitting there in a room, okay? Where we put people in a room with the academic credentials and the real world corporate experience. And then let me tell you, I always tell the man, if you don't get people like us.
Sam, let me hold you there for a little bit. Sam, let me hold you there a little bit.
All people who are better, let me finish. If you don't get people like us, or people who are better than us, your country will never go nowhere. And I will end on that. People like us, or people who are better than us, you need your best. Not though, many people that are not ready your country.
Thank you, Sam. You answered my question. Thank you. Mr. Jackson, you answered my question. Thank you. Mr. Lobbo, please come in. You read the paper by, no, you didn't read it. No, you read it, sorry, you read it, I sent it to you, by Steve. And Steve's argument is that to revive Liberian economy, we got to start with something. And he is suggesting that should be road. I wonder, this is why today we have the current government trying to focus on road. I think that's the argument they're making. But my question to you is, Do you agree with Steve's suggestion that we will start with roads, because any other thing that we have to do, we have to use the road in the first place?
First and foremost, I'm sorry for laughing, but here's what I want to say, and let me answer this question to you all today. The question you asked is a policy question. Okay. It's one that has to be addressed by the leader of a nation. It's one that has to be addressed by an administration that is focused towards moving a country forward. You see, one of the reasons why sometimes when I get to this discussion, I just have the conversation about what is in the news and let it be. The question was, how do we make the economy better? What are the recommendations? I took a step back to listen to the two economists want to discuss their recommendations. You see, it is a good thing. I admire their recommendations and suggestions. But sometimes as a policymaker, here's what I will say to this. It depends on the president, because it is a political decision, depending on the vision for the country. What I strongly believe that needs to be done right now, today, to begin to revitalize this economy today. When we talk about today, meaning in Liberia now, we have a government. We need to first and foremost restore confidence to our financial institutions. How do we do that? We need to enhance accountability, promote efficiency. We need to increase our efforts in fighting corruption. In the absence of cutting and limiting corruption, it will be difficult. I don't care how much resources, how much money we attract, how much money we borrow. If we borrow money that people will be stealing, we'll not get anywhere. Another thing we need to do, which I agree with Alex on before, but the way in which he said it, that's the difference. When he talked about we need to restructure government, I have been very, very clear that I've said that there's a need to reconsolidate some of our government ministries. I strongly believe that there's a need to move some ministries that are not useful right now, because we need a small, efficient government. One thing I've said, we need to cut wasteful spending in government. I strongly believe that if we will cut our national budget by 33% and redirect that money towards investing in education, in healthcare, in the agriculture sector, we can get an economy working. But you see, the reason why I admire our economists, they gave these recommendations. They step back and say we are technocrats. It is up to the politicians and the policymakers to make these decisions, which is true. Policymakers must adhere to these things. We look at these recommendations and say, what is important? What is our priority now? How do we get it done? Another thing that needs to be done on your question, the issue of infrastructure in Liberia, we all understand. Liberia do have infrastructure deficit, which of course we all know. But in the absence of revenue, in the absence of limited resources, the Liberian government that continue to struggle cannot underwrite the cost of a major infrastructure development. Now, how do we do it? We need to be able to engage in activities that promote growth. But how can we do it, Dennis? This is why I have said that there's a need to cut wasteful spending. I strongly believe that in Liberia, given the cost of living, I want us to set a standard, which means that no government official must make above $6,000 a month. There's no need to pay a lawmaker $15,000 to $13,000. I strongly believe that it could have been used to invest in some initiative that could say small microfinance and loan programs to empower Liberians. When we talk about employment in Liberia, people always want to look at the formal sector of employment. I see it from a different perspective. It is funny to know that at the end of this conversation, that the two panelists who criticized what I said before when I started this conversation have alluded and agreed education for. It's because he believed that the quality in the education in Liberia is substandard. But I believe that if we invest heavily in education, if we empower people and make sure that they are skilled and they can compete with people from whether from Wall Street or from the Bank of Shanghai, we don't need that. But in the absence of investing heavily in education, this is why we're having this problem. We have skill deficit. I mean, it bothers me. Let me tell you, Anthony. The United Nations came to Liberia. They told us they spent $500 million on peacekeeping operation. 200 million was spent on building capacities in Liberia. But one thing that Liberians did not pay attention to, 60% of the surveillance staff of the United Nations were foreigners, because we don't have the skilled Liberians to fill those jobs. So you see, this whole thing, we have to look at development. Let me finish. We have to look at development.
Something I want to add. Okay, what I'm asking is, your suggestion here is that it should be education, and that's a brilliant suggestion.
No, there should be investment in the education sector. It's not that one I'm saying. I'm talking about a lot of
please, what type of education are you talking about? Where should the emphasis be?
Listen, Anthony. When I talk about education, we have to look at, we've lost generations that are not educated. First and foremost, all sector. We need skill. We need vocational training institutions. We need technical colleges. We need all the different, look, some people will not be able to go to formal school anymore. We need to be able to transform those guys into, whether it's mechanic, whether it's being a carpenter, whether it's being a mason, whether it's being a plumber. We need all the skilled people we can to move our country forward. On the issue of roads, Anthony, here's what I've said. It is true that if we can restore confidence to our government, if we can demonstrate that our government is fiscally disciplined, if we cut wasteful spending, and we are living within our means, where we are managing our budget, we are avoiding budget shortfall, we are not overestimating expenditures so that we can be able to create additional waste for ourselves to steal. If we do those things and can be able to regain our confidence, that can enable us to go out and borrow. Another thing I've talked about to be able to invest in Liberia, or Anthony, we have a huge Liberian population in diaspora. I strongly believe if a government in Liberia create the necessary condition and can demonstrate transparency and can enhance accountability, it's possible to come out and create a program through the National Investment Commission where we can tell Liberians to invest $50 a month in Liberia and guarantee them returns on their investment, and use that money to build our own roads instead of going to borrow outside at high interest rate. If we take money from Liberians and promise to pay and give them 2%, it is better for me to take a 5 or 10% interest rate loan. So we need a government that is efficient. But I agree with Samuel Jackson on one thing here today. There's a need for us to attract skilled Liberians. There's a need for us to hire people who have the ability and the capacity to work. What we see in Liberia is that people are getting jobs based on some type of affiliations. Either they're in a Mason, either they're in another St. John, either they come from the same village together, or they belong to the same political class. We need to do away with that. We need to address this problem from a holistic perspective. There's not going to be a quick fix to this problem. But being fiscally disciplined and cutting wasteful spending and engaging corruption like no one else has done it, that is the way forward right now. Investing in small businesses, protecting the rule of law.
Thank you, Josh.
Protecting the freedom of expression.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Again, folks in cyberspace, thank you for being with us. This is a Christmas special, and we have been discussing Liberia economic past, present, and future. And we have had for now Mr. George Lobbo, Mr. Samuel Jackson, and Mr. Ellis Chuchu Jones. Mr. Jones, you just listened to George Lobbo.
Hold on, Mr. Sonny, we need to close the program now. Okay. So we'll just ask for the parting comments so that we can end the broadcast.
All right.
And let's start with Mr. Lobbo so he can leave.
I just spoke. Let it go ahead. I'll wait. I just spoke. Let me get a chance. Let it go ahead.
You said
I'll be the last. Let it go ahead.
That's why I wanted to start with
I'll wait.
Again.
All right.
Let me take a breather. Let us speak.
Hey, listen. First and foremost,
let me speak. I need to go quickly. Thank you very much. Look, ladies and gentlemen, we have some macro challenges facing the country today, and Mr. Lobbo alluded to one of the most vexing macro challenge, and that is within the financial system. You can't have illiquidity within the financial system. Banks don't have any money. Capital impairment. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You. Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
Okay. You have banks that are capital impaired. People going there standing in line for hours, Peace Corps volunteers leaving the country because of the breakdown in the financial system, the banking system. You have some embassies reducing their staff. So what is happening here? You see an implosion of the economy. We need to fix that and fix that quickly. The banks did a lot of political loans, and these loans amount to over $623 million. The total asset base of all the banks in Liberia combined, the 9 banks and the 93 branches, it's only $701 million. That's the total asset. And they have $618 million out in loans that are not being paid. Most of them are not being paid. The Liberian government needs to sit down. Its central bank needs to sit down and find out how deep a hole those banks are in, and we need to bring liquidity to the banking system. That's the number one. That's the number one macro challenge. The second macro challenge is the high inflation. We need to do something about this Liberian dollar. With 95% of it outside of the banking system, with inflation at 30%, and the reduction in purchasing power that is inducing it's inducing poverty. The third thing is you have a lot of youth in that country. Anytime you see those children there, you see they're singing, Bayama, Bayama, Bayama. If their children had jobs, they would never sing Bayama. I didn't sing Bayama when I was in school. Okay? They're gonna tell you, we never see Ellington. That's nonsense. Everybody is deeply politicized in the country because they don't have jobs. They're hungry. They don't have scratch cards. They don't have data. So they have to be sycophantic.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not finished yet. I have to, you gotta give me time.
How much time you need? It is your
You have to tell me how much time I have before I start.
Mr. Jackson, we need to end the broadcast so you can just wrap
Okay,
up.
listen, man. I see you guys. Look, you have a good day. I'm done. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, I'm just gonna be quick again. This was a very good special, and I want to thank the Liberian people, all those who are watching. This is what is needed in order to build a country for development. You need to have dialogue, economic dialogue, where people can come and speak their thoughts. And that's what's missing in our political system. Go to a political Liberian rally, and people like Jackson was saying, I don't know his name, Boyoma or Zoe or whatever. Do you think you're gonna find somebody who has spent the time and efforts trying to read and trying to understand theories and what am I doing there? So you need to have this kind of discussion, and we've been doing it for months. A lot of Liberians claim that, to be effective in Liberia, you need to go there. No, you don't need to be in a particular place to make change. You can learn about a place, educate people about it. And the only people, like I just challenge all the Liberians today, if any Liberian can tell me one economic benefit of having the presidency, then I will stand corrected. None of them can. In fact, I would say it's a disadvantage economically to have a president. The president doesn't do anything. When the president goes to sleep, does the country not work? When the president travels, does the country not work? It still works and functions. The only reason we have a president is to manipulate the political structure, keep people basically like beggars so that it can keep he or her in power. That's the only reason. Germany doesn't have a what you call a heretical presidency. Switzerland doesn't. And those are the two most developed countries. Germany has the fastest growth in Europe, one of the highest standard in Europe, even during the financial crisis. Why you think they weathered the financial crisis better? They are loaning to Greece and the UK. And why you think America has the economic deficit that it has? Because we just copy things without even understanding it. So we end up in a lot of chaos and problems. We need to get together and really start thinking for ourselves. Does this system work? If it doesn't work, scrap it. Find something else that works. If the goal is to get the HDI up or the GDP, if it's not going up, then you need to reevaluate yourselves. So again, like I said, our challenge is still on, and I'm gonna drill it in Liberia here. You do not need a president. The only person who will advocate that is either who is president or who wants to be president, because they simply want to have all of the power, right? And keep the Liberian people impoverished. You can make a lot of change in Liberia without being president. And I think we're making some changes here today. And so those who you see running for office and they want the other person to come and join their political party, call me, let's discuss ways to fix the healthcare system. Call me, let's strategize on how we can bring interest rate down. Don't call me to your political party because it doesn't feed people. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't corrupt. The only thing it does is it makes you, it accomplishes your goal. And to all the Liberian leader who listening, I will be on your backside. And I will make sure that Liberian people get educated, that you have used them, and you just want this power for yourselves. Thank you very
Alex.
much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I didn't ask you a question on that because that's a whole new area that we're going to.
Well, I say the economic benefits, so I look at it from an economic standpoint.
So yeah, let me go to Mr. Lobbo for his final comments.
Let me say thanks to Alex, Sammy, Dennis, and Anthony for such a fruitful discussion. I admire what you said, that if only we will begin to have these type of conversations, Liberia will go far, which is the truth. Sometimes people must disagree to agree. At least we've come to the climax where everybody today agree where we started off from, that our people are not educated, that our young people need skills, that until we can empower them, until we can be able to give them the knowledge they need to be able to be self-reliant, to be self-independent, to be financially fit, they will continue to be beggars. This is why I asked the other day. I said, when will the masses get tired? It is indeed that the masses have not changed. One thing I want all of us here to understand, whether you are an economist, whether you are a geologist, whether you are a scientist, we must understand that a government will decide its priorities. And the government will allocate resources to what it prioritizes. Those decisions are made by policymakers. The economists will make their recommendation to policymakers, and policymakers will decide what they want. And I want to say to you, as a country, what I have proposed have been very, very clear. I strongly believe we are behind. I check the budget right now. We are not even spending up to 20% towards education. The human development in our country is huge. In the absence of empowering our young people, our young men, I don't even want to use the word young men. In the absence of educating our society and giving them the skill, even if I borrow you 10,000 today, if you don't have the ability to manage it, you waste all. What we need to do is to get back to the basics. We have a society that has knowledge, skill deficit. While it is true we have infrastructure deficit, if we do not address it, if we build the infrastructure, the people will destroy it. Because for the infrastructure to last, you must have people who can manage the infrastructure. So today, I applaud this conversation. I want to say thanks to all of you Liberians who tune in, who took time from your busy schedule. Today is Christmas. To be here watching three brothers discuss the issue, I know you had to have interest in us. We are not the professionals, but at least all of us here, whether we agree or disagree on something, it is in the interest of our country. And I strongly believe this is why I come to these conversations, because I know that no man is an island. And as much as you believe that you are not indispensable, you are liable to mistakes, you must be willing to learn. You must be willing to hear new ideas. And I want to say to all of you, whether some of the things I said, you like it or not, that is fine. Whether you agree or disagree with me, I want you to know it is only in the interest of Liberia. The three of us who are here today, we can get jobs here in America. We can work anywhere in a developed society. But that is not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about how we build a vibrant society, a society that works for all Liberians, a society that addresses the need, that decentralized social services, that in this 21st century, that we can be able to restore confidence to our people and give them the decent life that they deserve in this 21st century. I want to thank the Liberia Focus on Liberia group for having me today. Dennis, Anthony, once again, I want to say Merry Christmas to all of you Liberians, wherever you're listening from. God bless you all. It's a pleasure being here with you today. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Josh, and thank you. Mr. Sear.
And so, folks, in cyberspace, this is how we will draw down the curtains. And we want to say thank you that you have followed us for the length of time we've been here. This has been a Christmas special for you. We are sure that you appreciate it because we have more than 100 people viewing us from the very start. Thank you from us here at Focus on Liberia. Our show come on Tuesday, which is the hour of politics. And as you know, I'm your host. And watch for Tuesday. It will be stimulating. That will do it from us. And bye-bye for now.
Join us this Friday for Debate Friday, and then on Saturday for our Business and Economic Forum. I'm sure Mr. Lobbo is going to be joining us for the first time on the Business and Economic Forum. Until then, my name is Dennis Jar, wishing you a Merry Christmas, good night.